I'm sure you've heard the news. Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi to his supporters, a name that resonates deeply within the corridors of power and the hearts of many Israelis. A man who needs no introduction, yet whose story is far more complex than the headlines suggest. His journey is a tapestry woven with threads of history, ideology, and personal ambition. Born in 1949, a mere 4 years after the ashes of the Holocaust settled, his early life was steeped in the Zionist ideology of his father, Benzion Netanyahu. The elder Netanyahu was not just a scholar but a fervent advocate for the Jewish state. A scholar known for his hawkish views, the elder Netanyahu instilled in his son a deep-seated belief in the existential threat facing Israel. This belief was not just academic, it was a lived reality, a constant reminder of the fragility of their existence. This upbringing, coupled with the shadow of the Holocaust, would forge within Netanyahu a steely resolve. The memories of a world that had turned its back on the Jewish people were ever present, shaping his worldview and his approach to leadership. He witnessed firsthand the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of violence. The turbulent landscape of the Middle East, with its wars and fleeting truces, was the backdrop of his formative years. These experiences would later manifest in his hardline political stances, his unwavering commitment to Israeli security, and his often controversial approach to leadership. His tenure in the military, particularly in the elite Sayeret Matkal unit, further solidified his views on security and defense. Even as a young man, Netanyahu exhibited a sharp intellect and an ambition that knew no bounds. His academic pursuits took him to the United States, where he attended MIT and Harvard, broadening his horizons and honing his strategic thinking. He excelled academically, served with distinction in the Israeli Defense Forces, and rose rapidly through the ranks of the Israeli political system. His early political career was marked by a series of rapid advancements, each step bringing him closer to the pinnacle of power. His charisma and oratorical skills were undeniable, captivating audiences both domestically and internationally. Whether addressing the Knesset or the United Nations, his speeches were a blend of rhetoric and conviction, leaving a lasting impact on listeners. Yet, beneath the veneer of confidence and charisma, a steely determination burned. This was not just the determination of a politician but of a man on a mission, driven by a profound sense of duty and destiny. It was the determination of a man who had stared into the abyss of history and emerged with a single-minded focus to ensure the survival of the Jewish state, no matter the cost. This focus was both his greatest strength and his most polarizing trait. This unwavering resolve, however, would also become a source of deep division, both within Israel and on the world stage. His policies and decisions often sparked intense debate, drawing both fervent support and vehement opposition. The legacy of Benjamin Netanyahu is one of complexity, marked by achievements and controversies, a testament to a life lived on the front lines of history. Netanyahu's political career has been marked by a calculated use of language. His speeches and public statements are crafted with a meticulous attention to detail, often designed to evoke strong emotional responses from his audience. His words, often delivered with a lawyerly precision honed during his years at MIT and Harvard, have the power to inspire fervent support and equally fervent opposition. This duality in his rhetoric is a hallmark of his political strategy, allowing him to galvanize his base while simultaneously provoking his critics. To his detractors, his rhetoric is inflammatory, divisive, and laced with coded appeals to fear and prejudice. They argue that his language exacerbates societal divisions and fosters an environment of hostility and mistrust. His pronouncements on the Palestinian issue, in particular, have drawn sharp criticism. Critics accuse him of using dehumanizing language that undermines the prospects for peace and reconciliation. His characterization of Hamas as a terrorist organization, while echoing the sentiments of many Israelis, has been perceived by some as a blanket condemnation of the Palestinian people. This broad-brush approach, they argue, fails to distinguish between militant groups and the broader Palestinian population, thereby perpetuating a cycle of animosity. His unwavering support for Israeli settlements in the West Bank, considered illegal under international law, has further inflamed tensions and alienated potential peace partners. The expansion of these settlements is seen by many as a significant obstacle to the two-state solution, a vision for peace that has long been advocated by the international community. Yet, to his supporters, Netanyahu's words are those of a strong leader, who refuses to mince words in the face of existential threats. They see his forthrightness as a refreshing contrast to the often ambiguous and diplomatic language of other politicians. They view his uncompromising stance as a necessary bulwark against a hostile world, a world that, in their view, seeks to undermine Israel's right to exist. For them, his rhetoric is not about division, but about survival and the defense of their homeland. His supporters point to his warnings about the dangers of a nuclear-armed Iran, his condemnation of terrorism in all its forms, and his unwavering commitment to Israeli security as evidence of his strong leadership. They believe that his clear and direct communication is essential in rallying the nation against external threats. To them, his words are not those of a divider, but of a protector, a man willing to speak uncomfortable truths in defense of his people. They argue that his rhetoric, while sometimes harsh, is necessary to convey the gravity of the threats facing Israel and to mobilize the country in its defense. On the international stage, Netanyahu's language has also been a tool of diplomacy and negotiation. His ability to articulate Israel's position with clarity and conviction has earned him both allies and adversaries. His speeches at the United Nations and other global forums are often closely watched and widely discussed. In press conferences and interviews, Netanyahu's responses are typically measured and strategic, aimed at reinforcing his narrative and countering criticism. His media appearances are carefully managed to project an image of control and authority. His interactions with military officials and visits to military bases further underscore his commitment to national security. These events are often used to highlight his close relationship with the defense establishment and to reassure the public of his dedication to their safety. Ultimately, Netanyahu's language of division is a reflection of his broader political strategy. It is a tool he wields with precision, aimed at consolidating his power and advancing his agenda. Whether one views him as a divisive figure or a steadfast leader, there is no denying the impact of his words on the political landscape of Israel and beyond. The Gaza Strip, a densely populated sliver of land on the Mediterranean coast, has become a tragic symbol of the seemingly intractable Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This narrow strip of land, home to nearly 2 million people, is often described as one of the most densely populated areas in the world. The daily lives of its residents are marked by a constant struggle for basic necessities, compounded by the ever-present threat of violence. For Netanyahu, Gaza has served as both a proving ground for his hardline security policies and a lightning rod for international criticism. His tenure as prime minister has been characterized by a series of military confrontations with Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza. Each conflict has tested his resolve and his ability to balance domestic security concerns with the pressures of international diplomacy. His decision to launch military operations in Gaza, while presented as necessary to combat Hamas rocket fire and protect Israeli civilians, has resulted in significant Palestinian casualties, drawing condemnation from human rights groups and international organizations. The military campaigns, often involving airstrikes and ground incursions, have led to widespread destruction of infrastructure and homes, leaving many Palestinians homeless and in dire need of humanitarian aid. The images of destruction and suffering emanating from Gaza have tarnished Israel's image in the eyes of many, even as Netanyahu defended his actions as justified self-defense. He argues that the military operations are aimed at dismantling Hamas's military capabilities and preventing future attacks on Israeli soil. However, the collateral damage and the high civilian death toll have sparked global outrage and calls for accountability. Netanyahu's critics argue that his policies towards Gaza, including the blockade imposed in 2007, have exacerbated the humanitarian crisis and fueled the cycle of violence. The blockade, which restricts the movement of people and goods in and out of Gaza, has been described as a form of collective punishment by many international observers. It has crippled the local economy, leading to high unemployment rates and widespread poverty. They accuse him of using disproportionate force, of prioritizing collective punishment over targeted operations, and of failing to offer a viable path towards a peaceful resolution. Critics argue that the repeated military offensives and the ongoing blockade have only served to entrench the animosity between Israelis and Palestinians, making the prospect of a negotiated peace seem ever more distant. His supporters, however, view his actions as those of a leader left with no other choice. They believe that Netanyahu's tough stance is necessary to ensure the safety and security of Israeli citizens. In their view, the threat posed by Hamas is existential, and any compromise would be seen as a sign of weakness, potentially inviting further aggression. They point to the indiscriminate rocket fire from Hamas, the tunnels dug under the border for the purpose of infiltrating Israel, and the group's stated goal of Israel's destruction as justification for his tough stance. For Netanyahu's supporters, the measures taken against Gaza are seen as unfortunate but necessary steps in a broader strategy to protect Israel from its enemies and to maintain its sovereignty in a volatile region. Netanyahu's relationship with former U.S. President Donald Trump was, to put it mildly, complicated. On the surface, it appeared to be a match made in political heaven. Both men shared a disdain for multilateralism, a penchant for populist rhetoric, and a transactional approach to foreign policy. Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and to move the U.S. embassy there, a move long sought by Netanyahu, was hailed by the Israeli right as a historic victory. Similarly, Trump's recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, a territory seized from Syria in 1967, was seen as a major diplomatic coup for Netanyahu. However, beneath the veneer of bonhomie and shared interests, tensions simmered. Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, a signature foreign policy achievement of the Obama administration, was opposed by many in the Israeli security establishment. They argued that while flawed, the deal had succeeded in curtailing Iran's nuclear ambitions, and that its collapse would only increase regional instability. Moreover, Trump's erratic behavior and his often inflammatory rhetoric on the world stage made many in Israel uneasy. They feared that his actions were undermining America's global standing and, by extension, Israel's security.